Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Tuesday, the 7th of February. Dude is here with us today. Right, Dude? Look. Say hi. He wants y'all to come and scratch his chest for him. It's his favorite thing. My name is Rachael Parker. My pronouns are she and her. I am an Anglican priest for Dayspring Ministries, which is a collaboration of St. Mary's Edgerton, St. Saviour's Vermilion, St. Thomas and Wainwright, in the Anglican Diocese of Edmonton, in the Anglican Church of Canada, in the beautiful province of Alberta. Glad to have you here with me today. Today I'd just like to talk a little bit about unexpected graces. In one particular one was the gift I had on last Friday to participate in being both an Archdeacon, the Archdeacon for Rural Ministries, which is a new title I picked up last October, and haven't had a lot of interaction with people yet. It's coming. But also an opportunity to meet with some students, some nursing students who are LPNs and working on becoming registered nurses, RNs, here in Canada. Some of you might know that back in October, I was made collated Archdeacon for Rural Ministry in our diocese. And the Diocese of Edmonton, geographically, is mostly rural and small town. Probably half of the churches in the diocese, though, live in the city of Edmonton, which is, Calgary might be bigger, but I think Edmonton's probably, if not the biggest city in Alberta, pretty close to. And so half of our churches exist there, which is where the office is, where our bishop resides and things like that. And so a lot of the decisions made and a lot of thinking done comes out of the context of being in the city. But close to half of our congregations are not in the city. And there hasn't been a lot of consideration, not because of ignorance, but I think because of just not thinking about it, not realizing. And our bishop had made the decision that he wants to change that. He wants to pay attention, close attention, to the work that's being done and the work that needs to be done by and for and with the rural churches, the smaller towns, and the fact that we have completely different challenges than the city does. And so I am the Archdeacon for Rural Ministries, and I've had only a chance to go out to I've been out to Ponoka to speak to the congregations in Ponoka and Camrose. But I had the opportunity, for another reason, to head up to Cold Lake on Friday. And it's about 2.5 hour drive from where I live. I got up and got out of the house at 7:15 and had the beautiful opportunity to watch the sunrise in my rearview mirror. And then got up to Cold Lake and met with their priest there, Donna, who is, she's fiercely loyal to St. John the Evangelist Church. And she feels that's been her church her whole entire Christian life. And she is serving there faithfully and trying hard to help the community. And she has a very strong ministry, in particular among the people in the community of Cold Lake. It's really impressive. And it was a really great opportunity for me to be able to sit down with another colleague and find out what they're thinking, what are their hopes and dreams, what are their fears, how are they exhausted, what gives them energy. And so it was a real gift to me to be able to have opportunity to get out of my own context and go and see the world through someone else's eyes, and to see what life is like in the northeasternmost part of our diocese. It was beautiful. But that afternoon, I also had the opportunity to go to Portage College to lead a session on the Doctrine of Discovery for nursing students. You see, in Canada, our Truth and Reconciliation Commission did a huge, long piece of work where they went across the country and invited Indigenous residential school survivors to tell their story. Not to be tried in court, not to have to prove what happened to them, but opportunities for them to come and be heard. And for opportunities for the rest of us, for settlers, to listen. And to just begin to scratch the surface of recognizing what has happened to our Indigenous siblings through the work that was done by our governments and by our churches, and by settlers as they came into Canada, finding terra nullius, like brand new earth where nothing ever was. The arrogance, the spiritual arrogance of believing that because we didn't know someone existed, they didn't exist. Hopefully we've come a long way from there. I'm not too sure we have. My sense is that that's a lot of what's happening right now when it comes to conversations about Black lives and Hispanic lives in the States, but also all the conversations about trans people and LGBTQ two-spirited plus, all of these people that we now have so much conversation about that there's becoming a huge backlash. And I think it really is a matter of, if I don't want to know you exist, then you don't exist. And if we have learned nothing else through residential schools and the work that was done against our Indigenous peoples in Canada, we must know that attitude of, if I don't want to know, then it isn't real. That's a childish, very childish way to think, and we can't go there. We will do so much damage if we do. I digress. This group of students, part of this was from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They did all this work, and then they came together and had 94 calls to action. Things that every Canadian can do in one way, shape, or form. There were many for the churches, things that churches specifically can do. And there were a number of calls for educational institutions, for those who are teaching lawyers, doctors, nurses, teachers, corporations, people who may indeed be into contact with Indigenous peoples. And the call was that all of these institutions of learning would implement into their teaching curriculum learnings about Doctrine of Discovery, the residential schools, and all those things that happened. Well, the University of Calgary in their nursing program had asked me for this particular nursing class of 8 young women to come in and use the Stolen Lands, Strong Hearts video series that was put together by the Anglican Church of Canada several years ago, to use that as a conversation piece, to walk them through what the teachings were in these videos and to have some conversation about what it means to them as nurses. And so I did on Friday. I spent just over 3 hours sitting with 8 young students and their teacher who were open to hearing new things, who some of it wasn't new because they're doing a little bit of work on the residential schools anyway, so they've been working on a project. So some of it wasn't brand new, but a lot of it was an awareness that even if they'd known it before, they hadn't realized it. They hadn't internalized it before. To find out just how many students went to the residential schools, to find out how many Inuit people we have in Canada and how far away they live, and how much of our Canadian geography is lived on and overseen by them. A huge amount of our coastland, a large percentage of our land in Canada is under the auspices of the people of the Inuit. There was one of the things they talked about was that in Canada, the time of the making of the video, Canada was ranked 6th in the world for the lifestyle, the ability for people to live. And for the Indigenous peoples, it was something like 55th. That is abominable. But these young women, these people who literally are taking our lives in their hands when they treat us in hospitals and doctors' offices and clinics everywhere, these young women are learning a new thing. They are learning to recognize context and the importance of that. We had a lot of talk about culture and the importance of recognizing that when someone comes to you in a hospital, they are already vulnerable. They are already scared. They don't know what's happening. They don't know what to do. And if we are culturally sensitive to them, even if we don't understand completely what they've gone through or who they are, if we reach out to them with some understanding and compassion, recognizing that they are not going to necessarily react or respond the same way we would, that will take them miles into the relationship with their patient. We need to be aware of how we treat Indigenous peoples differently than we treat white folk, settlers, colonists, whatever you want to call us, those who don't look like them. And I was really impressed by the work these young women were willing to do in recognizing that the world has to change. I think what impressed me the most was their absolute surprise that more work hasn't happened already. And when I challenged them to make that work happen, they said, well, how can we do that? And I asked them who the policy makers are. And they listed off, the people who been there for a while, the head nurses, the board of the hospital, the doctors. And I said, yes, but where did they start? I said, 20 years from now, you are going to be at the table where policies about how do we help these patients when they come in, what are the new policies and procedures we have in place for an Indigenous person or a Muslim who comes in and doesn't want to have their headscarf removed, or a man who is culturally fearful of having a female nurse. You one day will be part of the group that makes those policies. And if you continue to learn as you are learning today, then when the time comes, our policies will be in good hands. The fact is that we have to acknowledge the sins of our forefathers, but we do not have to continue them. And even if we feel like that we have nothing left to give, that we have who am I, little old me, in my little living room, in my house, what can I do to change the system? What can I do to change the government? You can actually do a lot. But it takes one small step after another small step after another small step that might help you to realize you have the courage and the ability to make that step a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger until that step becomes a stride, and that stride becomes a run, and that run becomes you making a change. Whether it's through politics, through local community action, speaking to your member of parliament, to your member of legislative assembly, or if you're in the States, your governor or your senator or your congressperson. Whatever it takes, you have the ability to affect change. And just think, if you expect to affect change a little bit yourself, how much more change could happen if you linked arms with your neighbor and with their neighbor and with their neighbor. Little things can become big things, and great change can happen. But we have to start someplace. Big changes will happen for the good because God is working in the rural and small town churches in the Diocese of Edmonton. Big changes will happen to me as I become a better priest, a better archdeacon, and better able to enable and support and come alongside those priests and those congregations of lay people who will thrive in doing what God is calling them to do exactly where they are, knowing that they don't have to be in the big city to make big changes, but they can make those changes right in their own congregations, in their own towns and communities. The same thing will happen when we continue to do teaching about things like the Doctrine of Discovery, when we teach about residential schools. And I know for those of you who are American, this is just beginning for you, and you are in our prayers. And if there is something that we can do, because we're a few years ahead of you in the process, we have a different history, but all of it's a painful history. Please know that as frustrating as this might be, and as hard as it will be, we've been through it. We have been through the denial here in Canada. We've been through the whole, we shouldn't have to apologize, it wasn't us. And yet we have. And it didn't kill us. And it didn't bankrupt us. It made us stronger, and it made us more able to say, how can we help? How can we change the way things are? And the same thing can happen for you south of the border. So God bless you as you go through your own growing pains and learning and apologies and fears and hopes and struggles with what is happening with you and your Indigenous siblings in the States as well. God bless you. God bless you all for the changes that you affect in your lives, in your communities, and for the world. And please pray for me and for all the clergy in the Diocese of Edmonton, because later on today and Wednesday and Thursday, we will be learning in a conference, intentionally learning about anti-racism and how we can help our congregations and our communities to work against racism. So pray for us, because there'll be some tough conversations. Have a great day. God bless you. I will see you again Friday for Church at Home with Rachael.